So this is the season of school projects, and we want to show you how you can make, well, a mountain, a hill. Anyway, any type of scenery you want to make. Would you believe that this is actually made from newspaper, masking tape, and plaster cloth? Now, what do I mean by that? This is plaster cloth, newspaper, masking tape. That's what was used to achieve this. You can see from the base, which is not covered. So what we need to do is to actually squash up some newspapers, all right? Squash them up. We know that for a mountain, the top is going to be somewhat narrower. So you can do that. So you can go on, squash it up. When we think we have what is acceptable, we can actually hold it with masking tape in different places to be able to get the shape. So maybe, okay, so we cut. That's the beginning of it. And we're going to go on like that until we are actually able to build up what looks like a conical shape. All right. And so with this, if we want, we can take another sheet and put it all around it. Now this part looks like it's going to sink in, so I'm going to get some more already squashed up newspaper and see. So you can, this way you can actually build any shape that you like. All right. So will this work for us? Most likely yes. And we can use the masking tape to help us define further the shape we want. So I can close this up with the aid of the masking tape. We're going to actually go on until we have in view the kind of shape that we want, right? So we're using the masking tape just to try and guide and hold in place what we want to achieve. Well, this is a bit of a slim mountain, don't you think? But you can see that the base is much wider. And once the base is in place, then it means that it's time for us to actually put our plaster cloth, right? So there are ways in which we can do this easily. We're going to need some moisture, of course, but we're going to start with this. I think this can sit now almost on its own, and if you can't, we just come here and snip off some more stuff. You know, it's actually not it's no big deal at all. And if you find that maybe the tip of the mountain is also not slim enough, we can tighten it by adding some more masking tape. We just cut some and add and make it much slimmer. All right. Okay, there we go. So again, the masking tape is just coming to guide. That's all it's doing. It's amazing what some of these things can be used for in the house. So you don't need to spend too much money on getting products done, because in reality, you don't get a price for how much you spent, but it's the creativity. And so let's say we have something like this. I see a hole in here that I want to plug, so we're going to add some more newspaper there. Okay, and yeah, I think that's about okay. It's a mountain, isn't it? So now that we have this and we have our plaster cloth, now this plaster cloth, we need to be able to put it around. So I'm going to just keep this aside for a minute because you've all seen it. You've seen what is inside it as well. So please be careful about this plaster. You don't want it in people's faces, and you don't also want to pour this down the drain, okay? So there are different ways of doing this. Sometimes some people want to actually apply a little bit of moisture so that as it's being dripped, it's actually holding on to something. It's okay to cut some off because we may want to allow some to go directly under. I need to see what I'm cutting. Yeah. And if you even need to double over the plaster cloth, that's fine. So we have it, and if you have a sprayed thing, you can use it. But of course, we're going to need to activate the plaster by actually adding moisture. Okay, we're going to wet it, and as I'm doing it, if I feel that there's a part of it I don't like, I want to, you know, like this hollow here, I'm not too happy with it. I can still take some more newspaper and put it in place. Don't forget that the job of the masking tape is really just to help to secure things. So that's okay. Yeah. Okay. So if you have a sprit, you can also use that. So we're just going to go around until the entire mountain is covered up. Okay. So I'm going to cut another piece and allow it to overlap there. Again, don't forget that to activate the plaster, we're going to need some moisture. So I'm using the brush to apply, and what is done, you can see it's overlapped very nicely there. So we're going to go right around, ensuring that our entire mountain is covered up. I remember having to do a giant product, like a big volcano. I mean, and we use the same principle really, just that we built it on the floor. But mostly it was with the newspapers, you know. And please remember that this plaster should not be poured down the drain because it would harden and you can end up blocking your drain and costing you money to get it fixed. Okay, so we're going round. Still have some space there. So I'm going to cut some more of the plaster cloth and use it to cover the space. Okay, let's see, what do we have? Now I can always cut a small piece to cover any area that is not fully covered, but I think what I've cut already now is actually adequate for the entire mountain. You can see the shape of my mountain. You can see it's taking shape. Don't forget what I said. If there's something you want to correct, feel free to correct it before the whole thing sets. So like I have an area now that doesn't have any plaster cloth. What I'm going to do is to cut off some of the excess and just put it in place. Once I moisten it, again, it's going to just it's going to flow with the rest. So I'm going to put this here. All right. So for those parents who sometimes feel really harassed when these school projects come up, at Crafties, we're here to support you. We have things on our website to show you what you can even save at home. You know, the things that could end up as trash that you can actually save so that when these projects come up, you know, you can actually use them. Have you seen the picture of the Pantheon that was made? I mean, that one, the columns, the lovely columns were actually made using what? Straw. Just the regular drinking straw. Used straws covered up with paper. I remember that was a brilliant suggestion by one of the young men in the house at the time. Okay? And this same plaster cloth can be used on balloons to actually enable it to form a dome, because the dome that we made at the time was actually made by draping this same plaster cloth over a balloon. So we wait for it to harden, and then we can actually puncture off the balloon and or leave it in place, and that's it. So even if it's a semi-dome, the rest of the balloon can always be removed or covered up. So we're going to put this to cover this. I hope you can see our mountain coming up. Can you see it? There we go. So we'll make sure that it's all thoroughly wet, and it's nice if it can sit properly, you know. So please overlap the plaster cloth fairly well, because later you can actually paint this. Doesn't this mountain look a little lopsided? It does. So I'm going to remedy that now by pressing it in place. And if I feel that any part of it still needs more newspaper, I'll just add it. Okay. So that's it. We're going to leave this to dry for overnight. Next day we can always check. All right. And mountains come in different shapes and sizes, don't they? So this one is flat on one side. Reminds me of one of the ones I saw on the way to Okene in Kogi State, Nigeria. Okay. So, do you think we have a mountain in place? Or rather, we make it a volcano. It's actually a volcano for it to have a little space in the middle. If it's a mountain, usually mountains just form a peak. If you wanted to do that though, could we not still do that? We actually can. While the plaster cloth is still moist, we can still manipulate it. Okay. So that's it. That's our mountain range. If you watched it from start to finish, you can see that this mountain is not particularly heavy, and that's because what it is made of is newspaper, masking tape, and of course plaster cloth.